Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program, the European Union shares its investment plan in Tunisia as part of measures to stop migration. And South Africa officially bids to host the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup. Let's start with the latest on Cyclone Idai. 4 days after Cyclone Idai hit Southern Africa, rescue crews are still struggling to reach survivors. Many are reportedly trapped in remote areas with no way out. The cyclone is one of the worst weather-related disasters to have hit the region, according to the United Nations. It estimates more than 2 million people have been affected.
Across Zimbabwe, Malawi and Mozambique, tens of thousands of people are counting losses. It's estimated that 1.7 million people were in the path of the cyclone in Mozambique alone.
We are talking about a massive disaster right now, with hundreds of thousands and the millions of people potentially affected. We need all the logistical support that we can get. We need to have proper assessments first of what exactly is needed. As we have heard, it is by air we can reach people, and it is by water as well.
Floodwaters have reportedly begun to recede in Zimbabwe and Malawi, but aid access remains the biggest challenge.
We don't have anything to eat here. We don't even have a blanket to cover ourselves with. We only have the clothes we are wearing. It's hard to die. We want to live, but we suffer. We have been suffering until today.
So the situation in Mozambique, we're confronted with severe flooding and cyclone effects. 600,000 people affected, possibly even going up to 1.7 and more million people affected by cyclone and flooding. Communication completely broken, infrastructure severely damaged, particularly in the city of Beira, but also all the roads to Beira have been cut off. What WFP is doing at the moment, we're helping with the assessments, we're bringing in food through with airplanes and helicopters.
Meanwhile, heavy rain is continuing and more is forecast. Several rivers are also about to burst their banks, raising fears of an outbreak in waterborne diseases. Cyclone Idai first made landfall in Mozambique last Thursday, before moving into neighboring Zimbabwe and Malawi. Aid agencies say the full impact is only going to emerge over coming days. Chamgono, CGTN.
Well, CGTN's Angelo Coppola is joining us from Mozambique. Angelo, devastating news there from Mozambique. What is the latest on the cyclone in Mozambique?
Well, we're currently outside the Renamo offices. There's the opposition party to the ruling party here in Mozambique, and they're very concerned. They came back yesterday from a visit into Beira, and the first thing that struck them was that food prices are being hiked astronomically. So people are taking advantage of the situation there by charging astronomical charges in terms of food. That's on one side. On the other side, there are rain predictions still for today and tomorrow. And if that does materialize, that's just going to make the rescue operations that much harder to do, because as it is, the roads are completely inaccessible going into Beira and going out of Beira. So what's happening at the moment is that choppers and light aircraft are being used to go and search for people who are in dire straits and who have possibly gone to higher ground. So as it stands right now, more rain expected. There are 2 flood warnings in 2 of the river basins quite close to the Beira area for the next 48 hours or so, and that's a major concern for all those agencies operating in the area at the moment. Beatrice?
And what about rescue operations, Angela? Because many people are yet to be accounted for. How have they been able to reach the victims?
Well, look, basically what's happening is the aid agencies are staying in Beira and waiting for people to come to them. That's the first stage. Hopefully the people within the Beira area that can will make their way through to the airport and also to the Beira hospital, although it was damaged severely in that cyclone hit. We understand that health officials in the hospital have treated some 1,500 people already for minor and major injuries. So that just shows you the potential scale of this disaster as it unfolds. So we're waiting to hear more information in that regard. But the bottom line is nothing can be done to get to those outlying areas at the moment. Beatrice?
Angelo Coppola for us there in Mozambique with that update on Cyclone Idai. Meanwhile, Zimbabwe's President Emmerson Mnangagwa has begun a tour of the flooded areas in the country to assess damages. President Mnangagwa says his government is in the process of providing adequate assistance to affected families. Some African countries, the European Union and Britain have announced aid packages to the three affected nations. Citizens in Zimbabwe are currently mobilizing donations, including cash, food and clothes to help thousands of families devastated by the cyclone.
I have come in order to visit the families, communities, as well as the infrastructure briefed has been destroyed, so we can assess and determine what government can do in terms of assistance. We need to make sure we understand the quantum of devastation in order for us to mobilize resources to deal with the situation as it stands. Countries like South Africa, Botswana, Namibia and Angola have indicated that they also would want to know what our needs are, and we are busy now compiling materials which we think they could assist us with.
Well, let's hear the extent of the damage from Zimbabwe. CGTN's Farai Mwaktuya is joining us from Chipinge for more. Farai, what can you tell us, though, about President Emmerson Mnangagwa's tour to those flooded areas?
Well, indeed, President Mnangagwa got on the ground in Manicaland province yesterday, and today he is visiting the flood victims and the areas where this rescue operation is taking place, an area called the Skyline. That is where the helicopters are being deployed from, going into the affected areas, bringing back the injured and the hurt. Those helicopters are also taking in provisions and supplies to the affected community. So President Mnangagwa is touring that area today to get a first-hand look at the rescue operation that is underway, to appreciate and understand the challenges and the needs and the requirements for that effort, but also to speak directly to the people who've been affected, the survivors, the victims, also understand their stories and some of their needs. I think some of the sentiment that I've received from the people I've spoken to on the ground, the people who've been affected, is that, look, a lot of the things that they're getting, they're very appreciative of, but they also require more, and I think the president is also here to find out what more his administration can do to assist those people.
Several African countries, the European Union, Britain, have all offered support to those affected in Mozambique. What kind of support is Zimbabwe getting, and who's providing that support?
Well, indeed, you mentioned those countries who've, put up and made commitments to support Zimbabwe. We understand President Mnangagwa said yesterday he had also received commitments from his counterpart in Tanzania, who is sending over a plane load of provisions, food, medicines, amongst others. We understand that, he cut short his trip from the United Arab Emirates, and while he was there, before he came back to Zimbabwe to deal and attend to this issue, he had also received commitments from the United Arab Emirates, and we understand that some crucial medicines and supplies are also coming from the United Arab Emirates. I think right now what we are seeing being donated to Zimbabwe is food aid, financial support to be able to repair some of this infrastructure. Medicines, I think, are also very crucial and critical, and are some of the things that Zimbabwe is looking to get in terms of assistance from the international community. But as you said earlier, a lot of Zimbabweans internally are mobilizing themselves, putting up anything that they have, whatever it is, provisions, utensils, clothing, all that is being put together, packaged across the country at collection points, and is now being transported up here to the Eastern Highlands to reach those people who need it.
Farai, we are seeing the devastation coming out of Southern African countries and coming out of Zimbabwe, and of course the thousands affected. It is beyond the scope of the ordinary people, the Zimbabweans themselves, as you've put it, bringing, coming out to assist the fellow citizens. So how exactly is President Mnangagwa's government dealing with the aftermath of the disaster?
Well, the response had been delayed somewhat because of unfavorable weather. There was a consistent rainfall, there was cloud cover and mist, so it was very difficult for the search and rescue operation to go ahead. Some roads were blocked, but we do know now that those rescuers, those operations are now on the ground. They're actively going out and finding people who are in need of assistance, who are in need of medical attention. I had an opportunity yesterday to get on the ground, to speak directly to some of the caregivers, to speak to some of the rescuers, and to find out how that is going. And here's what's happening on the ground here in Chimanimani.
After days of bad weather, rescuers managed to cut through fallen trees and clear debris that had blocked roads to get to a rescue center where helicopters were finally able to fly into the worst affected areas.
It's been a non-stop shuttle service by these helicopters who've been flying critical supplies to marooned communities and bringing back dozens of injured, desperately in need of medical attention.
The injured are being brought here for initial assessment and triaging before transfer to Chipinge Hospital.
We've head injuries, some have fractures, broken limbs, some also broken pelvis or hips. Most of the patients are saying it's because of mud. They were partly covered by mud and stones, or the house gave in and fell on top of them. Some of the people have fevers. We were just noticing the temperatures are high because of the open wounds that they have. Some are saying they got injured around Friday, so they didn't get attention from there, so some of the wounds were now septic.
It's been a harrowing experience for those who've made it out alive, one that's likely to leave permanent scars long after the superficial ones have healed.
We may treat the wounds now, but there are a lot of mental health issues that will arise from this. I've heard some of the stories from the people, the local people, some of the patients, what has happened to them, the people they have lost, and the scenarios. Those people need counseling. They'll need psychiatric help to get over those things. Because some of them, they've lost the whole family. Some have lost children, and the way they are describing it, that will have an effect on their mental health.
At least 500 people are reported still missing somewhere in the valleys of Chimanimani. Rescuers are in a race against time to reach them before it's too late. All this under the watchful eye of survivors, lucky enough to have escaped unscathed, but now in anguish as they wait, hoping their loved ones and neighbors might be among those coming in on the next flight. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Chimanimani, Zimbabwe.
Well, that was the rescue operation that is currently underway in Chimanimani. It's a race against time because we are told by people who've come out of some of these areas that there are still many more who are trapped, who are in need of assistance. And that is what this rescue effort is trying to do. Hopefully, it will get a fresh and an impetus from the president visiting, as he's also hopefully able to put forward more resources and mobilize more support for those communities who do require it.
Farai Mwakutuya in Chipinge, one of the areas affected by the cyclone, bringing us that update from Zimbabwe. And we now go to Malawi, where a large number of schools based in the flood-affected areas in Malawi have been closed, with some being used as evacuation centers. Children are currently studying under trees after floods destroyed their classrooms. Our reporter Daniel Arap Moi is in Malawi and brings us the latest.
Hundreds of children in southern Malawi have seen their lives turned upside down by the devastating floods. School authorities have been compelled to organize classes and continue with academic work under trees. The situation has become unbearable for both teachers and pupils as torrential rains continue to disrupt academic exercise.
Most of the learners, they are not coming to school because the rivers are flooded and they are unable to cross those rivers to come to school.
Some of the pupils studying under trees say academic exercise comes to a halt whenever it rains. Displaced parents remain uncertain about the future of their children as their hope for a quick recovery fades away.
The problem is that many students lost some books and learning materials such as ruler, pencils, and men.
We ask the government to help us with shelter. We don't have food, we don't have blankets, and our children are not able to go to school because they have nothing to wear.
Some have now opted to seek learning inside abandoned village church house over fears of possible return of the deadly flash floods. These children have not only had their education dreams shattered, they have also lost their homes, schools and even friends. In Full Primary School, children lack the basics of education as condition forces them to sit on the cold classroom floor. According to officials, torrential rain and flash floods have displaced more than 200,000 children south of Malawi. The Department of Disaster Management Affairs says 56 people have died and 577 injured due to the heavy downpour and subsequent floods south of Malawi. Forecasts predict the severe weather may continue in the coming days and weeks, intensifying the dangerous situation for thousands of children. For now, these little children need all the help they can get, and they need it now. Daniel Arab Moy, CGTN, Chikwawa District, Malawi.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. AU forces from Kenya vacate Somalia military bases. And doctors and students protest against Algeria's government.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's take you to Somalia, where African Union forces from the Kenyan contingent have vacated several military bases along the border between the two countries. CGTN's Abdul Aziz Bilo reports now from Mogadishu on what the pullout means for authorities in that country.
Kenyan forces under AMISOM vacated Busar village, one of the few forward operating bases for the African Union forces in the Gedo region along the border with neighboring Kenya. Al-Shabaab has since retaken the base after the withdrawal of Kenyan soldiers who controlled the outpost for more than 7 years. The abrupt pullout has led to mass displacement of locals who are fleeing to nearby Elwaq, that is approximately 40 kilometers near the border between the two countries. Early in March, militant group Al-Shabaab retook Fafahdun town near Busar following a similar withdrawal.
The lack of an alternative army to hold these towns and villages and military outposts is the reason why Al-Shabaab finds it easy to retake them after the pullout of AMISOM forces. This is a big setback for the African Union and Somali government after holding Busar for years.
Al-Shabaab has previously attacked Kenyan forces in the Gedo region, including a deadly raid in 2015 in El Adde that claimed scores of Kenyan troops. AMISOM is yet to comment on the latest pullout that comes less than a month after it announced a new concept of operation that includes launching offensives on key Al-Shabaab strongholds to deny the group freedom of action and movement. On Monday, the fighters stormed a rural town near Mogadishu, briefly seizing control of Balad. Government forces later retook it after engaging the militants in a deadly crossfire, according to witnesses. Analysts say the latest setbacks were likely to inject new life into the Al-Qaeda-linked group.
The capture of Balad town, that is 30 kilometers from Mogadishu, is a big security setback for the government and regional authorities. Security forces should attack Al-Shabaab in their strongholds, not repel attacks. Hirshabelle is inaccessible by road because currently Al-Shabaab occupy the main road from Jowhar to Mogadishu.
The latest resurgence by the militant group Al-Shabaab has created fresh concerns among many here in the country. The African Union force AMISOM has been operational in Somalia for over a decade now, but has been unable to end the militant insurgency. Experts now want a change in the current approach so as to avert a reverse in gains made over the years. Abdul Aziz Bilo, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
Well, let's cross over to Abdulaziz now. He's joining us from Mogadishu with more on that story. Abdulaziz, so what might be the cause of the Kenyan contingent vacating several military bases along the border with Somalia? What do we know?
Well, Beatrice, there's been no comment regarding the pullout by Kenyan forces in Busar. Busar now lies along the border between Kenya and Somalia and was the last forward operating base belonging to Kenyan forces in the Gedo region that acts as a buffer zone to prevent attacks from Al-Shabaab inside Kenya. So the abrupt pullout came as a shock to authorities as well as locals in that specific region. And as we've mentioned in that report, Busar, Kenyan forces were in Busar for almost 7 years. They seized that village almost 100 days since they crossed over into Somalia in early 2011. And after pulling out abruptly after 7 years, it created concerns among locals who decided to move to El-Wak so that they can save their lives there, because most of these locals have been working with Kenyan forces in protecting that area. And once Al-Shabaab retake that area, then they will be victims of Al-Shabaab attacks. They might be beheaded, they might be killed for working alongside Kenyan forces. So it's not the first time again that Kenyan troops have abandoned an operating base in Gedo region. Just earlier this month, they abandoned a village called Fafahdun, a strategic one for that matter, that connects the road linking Afmedu and Doble, two places where Kenyan forces are stationed at the moment. But then again, the pullout is a big shock to regional authorities, especially in that area where it links between Kenya and Somalia. And the two countries have a joint security protocol that creates a buffer zone to protect Kenyan interests inside Kenya from Al-Shabaab attacks coming from Somalia. So how that issue will play out remains a big challenge, but it's a big loss for AMISOM, a big loss for Somali forces who are not able to replace Kenyan forces after they abandoned that military base.
Abdulaziz, so what's been the reaction though? Any response from AMISOM or the government of Somalia to that withdrawal?
Well, the African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM, we've tried to contact them, but they're not answering our calls. All we are getting is that they want us to channel this question specifically to Kenyan authorities so that they can explain why their forces that operate and AMISOM decided to abandon these forward operating bases along the border between Somalia and Kenya. But then again, it remains to be seen how AMISOM will address this issue, because it's a big loss for them. This is an area that acts as a supply route for Kenyan forces coming from Kenya all the way to the port city of Kismayo, where Kenyan forces are stationed. But Jubaland authorities who are in charge of that specific area have also raised the alarm, saying that it's very wrong for Kenyan forces to pull out abruptly, endangering the lives of hundreds of civilians who have been living under their shelter, under their protection for almost 7 years. So they're saying that this will in turn create concerns between public cooperation with AMISOM. Locals are of the view that since Kenyan forces remained in Somalia for almost 7 years and they decided to pull out abruptly and Al-Shabaab taking over these bases, then trusting the AMISOM forces again when they want to recapture these areas will prove to be a daunting task for Kenyan forces. And it has raised concerns here among Somali authorities who are of the view that it will impact security not just of Jubaland but also of Kenya.
So how exactly is that withdrawal going to affect security in both Somalia and Kenya? Because as you mentioned, the Jubaland authorities where this falls under have expressed concern about the rather abrupt withdrawal by the Kenyan forces.
Well, Beatrice, we're talking about a militant organization that has carried out deadly attacks inside Somalia and also in Kenya. Since 2011, after Kenyan forces came into Somalia and the subsequent addition of them to the African Union mission in Somalia, AMISOM, we've seen deadly attacks being launched by Al-Shabaab inside Kenya, especially towards the northeastern region, including the deadliest attack in Garissa University College, where more than 150 students were killed. So the fact that Kenyan forces operate in the Jubaland region, that is Gedo, Middle Juba and Lower Juba region. These regions act as a buffer zone to prevent deadly militant attacks inside Kenya. And the fact that Kenyan forces who controlled that stretch of land that is controlled between both sides, then it poses a direct threat more so to Kenya, because Al-Shabaab will try to launch more attacks inside Kenya rather than inside Somalia on Kenyan forces after the pullout of Kenyan troops on these bases. bases. So authorities in Jubaland want Kenyan forces to remain in these forward operating bases until the regional forces are better equipped enough to take control of these bases, which at this stage and this time it will prove a daunting task also for regional authorities whose army is still under-equipped, poorly trained, and they don't have the right capability compared to AMISOM. So AMISOM must reconsider this approach, according to security experts here, who say that if the security forces don't man the borders, then Kenya will fall vulnerable to more deadly Al-Shabaab attacks as we've witnessed over the years.
Abdulaziz Bello joining us there from Mogadishu. Thank you. Let's now go to Algeria, where more anti-government protests are ongoing as the country marks its 57th anniversary of the War of Independence. This time around, medical students and doctors are demonstrating against the president's plan to stay in power beyond the end of his term. Here's CGTN's Jen Keo with more details.
Thousands of students, university professors and health workers have rallied in Algiers, calling for President Abdelaziz Bouteflika to quit.
Today, the health sector has come out to express its opinion. We have come out to protest against the current system of leadership. We want a new system. Everyone has to leave.
Bouteflika has ruled Algeria for 20 years. Last week, he bowed to the protesters by announcing he would not stand for another term. But he stopped short of stepping down and said he would stay in office until a new constitution is adopted. His moves have done nothing to halt demonstrations. Instead, the protesters peaked on Friday with hundreds of thousands of protesters on the streets of Algiers. Jane Keo, CGTN.
Thursday marks the International Day of Forests. The day was established through a resolution of the United Nations General Assembly in 2012. Each year, various events celebrate and raise awareness of the importance of all types of benefit of current.
And half of the world's tropical forests have been destroyed over the last century alone. Deforestation caused by human activities and climate change pose major challenges to sustainable development and have affected the lives and livelihoods of millions of people in the fight against poverty.
The global celebration of forests provides an opportunity to create an awareness about all kinds of importance of the woodlands and trees, and also celebrate all the ways in which they sustain and protect us in various ways.
To do advocacy on the importance, the values, the ecosystem services we receive from the forest. Forests are important for livelihoods. Forests are important for cultural, environmental and social reasons. Forests are part of building resilience to various shocks, various disasters, natural or man-made. So we cannot develop sustainably if we ignore the forestry sector. It's an important component of our food security system, our ecosystems also.
Countries are encouraged to undertake efforts to organize local, national and international activities involving forests and trees.
It shouldn't be just an activity that they have to organize simply because the day is set, but they should also share their own personal experiences. That's how they'll actually reach out to the community. And as far as the community is concerned, it's important for the next generation because that's where knowledge gets to be passed on. Forests have to be sustained. It doesn't matter whether it's a naturally occurring forest or a forest that has been created. In other words, people have come together and decided to plant trees to create a forest.
UN statistics show that around 1.6 billion people depend on forests for their livelihood, including 70 million indigenous people. Forests are home to more than 80% of all terrestrial species of animals, plants and insects. Yudis Njamela for CGTN in Pretoria, South Africa.
China's foreign ministry has confirmed President Xi's state visits to Italy, Monaco and France starting from March the 21st to the 26th. It comes following invitations from Italian President Sergio Mattarella, Prince Albert II of Monaco and French President Emmanuel Macron. President Xi plans to meet with each. In another development, the large-scale China-led Belt and Road Initiative has faced some resistance in Europe, making Italy's support all the more important. CGTN's Michelle Badavid reports from Florence in Italy.
Italy's expected signing of a memorandum of understanding to become part of China's Belt and Road Initiative is significant not only for Italy, but also for its Western allies who have issued some statements of concern. However, Italian officials have repeatedly emphasized that this agreement would create massive opportunities for Italy and for the region, mainly for financial reasons. On Tuesday, Italian Prime Minister Conte emphasized that the agreement can boost Italian exports to a market of an enormous size. The country's Undersecretary of State for Economic Development has also stressed that other countries have already been taking advantage of this huge potential. But the Interior Minister, Matteo Salvini, has also pointed out that if he believes that there are some concerns regarding national security, he would say no to the deal. Now, in an attempt to reassure some Western allies, Prime Minister Conte issued a statement regarding the potential agreement that they will be signed with China in the upcoming days.
The framework of the Memorandum of Understanding on the Belt Road is purely economic and commercial. It does not remotely put into doubt our Euro-Atlantic alliance. Its content, negotiated for many months with Beijing, involving all the administrations concerned, presents no risk for our national interests and is fully in line with the strategy of the European Union, and in fact it promotes it as no other member state has done so far in its dealings with Beijing.
One thing is clear. Conte is firm in his belief that cooperating with Beijing regarding the Belt and Road Initiative is a good idea and will be beneficial for Italy. Michal Bardavid, CGTN, Florence.
The first of the victims from the Christchurch mosque shootings have been laid to rest. Hundreds of people attended the funerals of a father and his son, while other families endured the agonizing wait to receive the bodies of their loved ones. CGTN's Greg Navarro has more.
The bodies of a father and his teenage son killed in the Christchurch shootings were carried on the shoulders of mourners to a gravesite. Another teenage son who was badly injured but survived the attacks remained at their side.
Having the son stand over his father and brother, he himself wounded, and to farewell and say to his father, I don't want to be here alone. That was devastating.
They are the first of 50 funerals that will take place here over the coming days, all of them killed by a lone gunman while praying inside 2 mosques last Friday. Dozens more were injured.
Even when he was giving condolences, we tried to not shake his hand and try to not lift his hand and not touch his foot because they're still wounded, but he refused. He wanted to shake everybody's hand. He wanted to show them that I appreciate what you've done, and that's amazing.
Frustration is beginning to grow for other victims' families, forced to wait while authorities carefully build their case against the suspected gunman, and more importantly, make sure they've positively identified each person. In fact, the chief coroner has reportedly said the last thing anyone wants is to return the wrong body to the wrong family. At a nearby school, students performed a traditional Maori dance in the presence of the country's prime minister. 2 of the students here were among the shooting victims.
We want to make sure that we do everything that we can to look after you during this time, and just know that everyone is grieving alongside you as well.
Crime scene investigators were nearing the end of their work at one of the mosques. Both plan to open again by the end of the week. Tributes to the victims continue to grow across Christchurch, this one now stretching hundreds of meters. Samantha Fitzgerald didn't personally know any of the victims, but she said she wanted to do something to show her support for the families and the community.
We're all in this together, and we want the Muslim community to just know that we're actually grieving.
And she says, like so many here, grieving alongside those directly impacted by the attacks. Greg Navarro, CGTN, Christchurch.
And your business news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. The European Union shares its investment plan in Tunisia as part of measures to stop migration. And Egypt in a deal with Nissan to produce 100,000 cars a year.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector. Problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The European Union has presented its external investment plan in a forum held in the Tunisian capital, Tunis. The initiative is the latest instrument by the European bloc to attract more investment. CGTN's Adnan Chauchi reports.
The Tunisian government and the EU office in Tunis have presented the EU external investment plan. It is the latest instrument intended to stimulate investment in Mediterranean countries and sub-Saharan Africa.
The EU External Investment Plan, EIP, will increase the ceiling of financing granted to Tunisian investors and boost investments in promising sectors such as IT, energy, agriculture and services.
The minister says the plan, with an input of about $5.1 billion, is expected to leverage about $50 billion of investment in EU partner countries.
A dedicated financial guarantee of $1.7 billion budget is made available to cover the risks incurred by partner financial intermediaries or private investors. The plan is also designed to help a growing number of Tunisian economic operators accessing funding at more favorable terms.
Several European and international financial institutions are involved. They include the European Investment Bank, the French Development Agency, Germany's KfW Development Bank, and the African Development Bank, to name a few.
The increase of the financial ceiling and the putting in place of a guarantee mechanism are meant to contribute to the revival of the investment activity in Tunisia. Banks will be encouraged to fund investments which will help generate jobs in various sectors.
Tunisian authorities say the guarantee mechanism geared towards covering risks related to investment under the external investment plan will help develop a legal framework of investment. It will also remove administrative obstacles, digitize administrative procedures, and improve the business climate. Adnan Chauchi, CGTN, Tunis.
Egypt has reached an initial deal with Japanese automaker Nissan Motor to produce around 100,000 cars annually in the North African country. The agreement, signed in partnership with state-owned car maker El Nasser Automotive Company, is part of efforts to boost the percentage of locally made auto components in cars assembled in Egypt. That's with a focus on exporting most of the production to other countries. El Nasser specialized in the making of local versions of Fiat cars before it ceased production shortly before Egypt's 2011 unrest. The final deal is set to be signed in 3 months' time. Italian energy giant Eni has announced a new gas discovery in the Noor exploration prospect offshore in Egypt. The exploratory is well in the second major gas find for the firm in Egypt in the last 3 years. CGTN's Yasser Hakim explains the impacts the discovery is set to have in the North African state.
It could be the largest gas field yet in the East Mediterranean. It's called Noor. The new field is the second major gas discovery for the Italian company Eni in Egypt in the last 3 years.
What is good about Noor concessions, it is close to the shore. It's not like Zohr. It's about 50 kilometers. It's north of Sinai, so that will allow also Egypt for the development of Sinai. It's close to existing field, so to develop the discovery, you can connect to the existing facility. It's a shallow water. It's about 295 meters compared to 1,500 meters for Zohr, so that's also accelerate the development and also will make it also cost effective.
Coupled with the largest gas field, Dohor, the natural gas production has exceeded consumption and turned Egypt into an exporter of natural gas.
We have reached in September 2018 a record of 6.6 billion cubic feet, We started again re-exporting in January to Jordan. We start also the idle LNG facility in Damietta and Edco now with using this facility. And we export about 400 million cubic feet in October and November. So we start using this existing facility. These two facilities have a capacity of exporting 1.6 billion cubic feet per day.
The sudden boost in the gas and oil sector is owed to the new incentives provided by the government to the oil firms. It also follows the closure of all disputes with the government. The state had paid back most of its debts to foreign oil firms accumulated due to the shutdown of drilling work after the 2011 and 2013 uprisings. The latest discoveries have created an appetite for foreign oil companies to invest more in the energy sector in Egypt. Already these companies have applied for more concessions in the country off the shores of the Mediterranean and the Red Sea. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
South African businesses and households are set to continue being subjected to regular power cuts as the country's main power utility Eskom struggles with capacity shortages. The Public Enterprises Ministry has called on South Africans to cooperate as the power producer works through the current crisis.
In order to ensure that we lighten the burden on South African businesses, but South Africans generally, wherever they might be in our country, we want to work more closely with municipalities and households and businesses as well to orchestrate the schedules of load shedding in a way in which we cause the least amount of disruption and damage.
Our current plants, the new ones are not producing the required capacity. The old ones are too old. We are now pushing them. There's only just so much that they can do.
In the U.S., the Federal Reserve has started its second policy meeting of the year. It likely will not raise interest rates as the global economy slows. Members of the rate-setting Federal Open Market Committee have said repeatedly since December they will be patient before deciding on the next rate increase. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell is due to announce the committee's rate decision this Wednesday after the panel concludes its two-day meeting. Norway's Norsk Hydro, one of the world's largest aluminium producers, battles to contain a cyber attack on Tuesday that halted parts of its production. The company shut down metal extractions and rolled products plants, which transform aluminium ingots into components for car makers, builders and other industries. Its giant smelters in Norway were largely operating on a manual basis. Norsk Hydro has not yet identified the hackers.
We discovered it after midnight that there was some unusual activity on our servers in the United States, and we started our countermeasures.
Encryption viruses are always serious. It's an encryption of the machine, and it makes it unusable unless you have backup.
Of course it's serious. And of course it's serious that a virus can infect such a big international organization as Hydro, and it's something we take very seriously, and we are working very hard to find a solution.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. Nigeria's furniture maker combines modern design with Yoruba culture.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The Nigerian furniture maker Tosin Oshinowo is incorporating traditional Asuoki fabric into her contemporary designs. A lifestyle brand celebrating West African culture is growing in popularity. CGTN's Laura Walubengo reports.
Asuoki cloth is traditionally hand-loomed by the Yoruba community in West Africa. Up-and-coming Nigerian designer Tosin Oshinowo is now using this cultural fabric to make chairs. Her contemporary lifestyle brand, Ile Ila, translates as House of Lines.
The vision behind Ile Ila really was about celebration of self,
celebration of culture, celebration of being Yoruba, celebration of being Nigerian, celebration of being African. I'm really trying to find a space in the market where creating strong, contemporary, authentic African bespoke furniture. We hadn't seen anything that kind of existed in that realm, and we wanted to fill that gap.
Trained as an architect, Oshinowo designs digitally, which she says improves precision and quality. A team of carpenters and tailors then bring her creations to life, building frames and fitting upholstery. The 39-year-old says the handmade chairs are built with locally sourced wood and fabrics.
And I like the traditional feeling about it. While I was growing up, I think my dad has a chair like this, and it's called one Yoruba name, Agbantara or something. So, and I like the fact that it comes in the traditional material that is ashoke, which I kind of like.
It's not an imitation chair of another company or another designer. And being able to take the importance of design, aesthetic, and marry it with authentic African in terms of the materials that we use, I think is really what makes the brand strong.
Ile Ila furniture is priced between $1,000 and $2,000. So far, Oshinowo has sold about 200 pieces since she set up shop in 2017. A small business owner is now looking to scale up production. Laura Balubengo, CGTN.
Alexandra Township is one of the most densely populated townships in South Africa. Overcrowding and a lack of basic services can make life quite challenging for youngsters trying to focus on doing well in school. Yoga for Alex is using a different approach to help young people deal with daily stress and help them focus on their own lives. CGTN's Julie Shire has more.
It's the middle of the day in Johannesburg. These learners have travelled from Alexandra Township for their weekly yoga. Classes are usually done in school, but they're on holidays. The session is led by Dimpho Banda, also born in the township.
In grade 10, I got the opportunity to go to school in India, and it was an amazing experience. It was a life-changing experience. So I did my grade 10 till 12 there. And at first it felt awkward because I came from a very loud place in Alex.
Alexandra is a bustling township with high crime and unemployment rates. Many live in poverty with little space to be themselves.
They're taking care of their little sisters, they're taking care of their sick mothers. They live in a place where there's no peace. Their parents are always fighting. It's hard for them to focus in school.
Banda came back to teach Kundalini Yoga. It helps human beings heal the body, mind and soul and taps into their potential.
I go to Alex High. They started this because kids from Alex suffer a lot from depression, anxiety, a lot of things because there's a lot of noise, we can't study. And then when they started this, we learned to calm down and then just take things as they come.
It helped me and actually changed my life since I started to do yoga last year. I've actually decreased with my anger issues and a lot of activities I do.
I use those meditations that we do here at Yoga for Alex, also in class before I write my test. I just do the meditation before I write and then I go into the test, and it helps me a lot to generate more knowledge of things that I've studied.
Yoga is an ancient Hindu practice which has been adopted around the world to help with physical and mental well-being. For these children, it gives them a chance to escape their usual environment and to develop much-needed coping skills.
It helped me in a way to forgive my father, since I have a very bad background. So I've learned to understand the pain, then to take it out and forgive him, and also forgive myself.
Since I was involved in lots of car accidents, it helped me to heal my mind. And I think it will also help those who were hurt before.
Searching for inner peace in one of Johannesburg's most notorious townships can be challenging, but these youngsters have connected with their mind, body and soul and are hoping others follow. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead. South Africa officially bids to host the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
South Africa is among a record 9 countries that have submitted a bid showing interest to host the 2023 FIFA Women's World Cup. The Southern African nation has confirmed their interest, looking to become the first African nation to